Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the HP Spectre X360 15t. Now this is the Tiger Lake, which is Intel's 11th gen refresh of processors. It launched towards the end of 2020, and that's when I first started covering it. And even here, nearly in the middle of 2021, this is still an incredibly competent and compelling two-in-one option. 15.6-inch UHD, that is 4K resolution IPS panel, 16:9 aspect ratio. You can also get this in an OLED panel if you prefer that. Now, I personally do, but if you want to save some money, get a little bit more battery life, and put any fear of burn-in to bed, this would be the way to go. And initially, when I got this, I said to myself, there's no way I'm going to be able to really tell any of you out there that the IPS panel holds any sort of competition against the OLED option. The good news is it's pretty good. Viewing angles are not as good as the OLED, contrast not as good, but these are expected. It's still fairly bright, not as bright again as the OLED, but fairly color accurate. I mean, this is pretty much a best-in-class IPS panel in my opinion. Touch input is very good. You're not going to have any issues with that at all. When it comes to the pen input, HP for this Spectre refresh did give us a new pen, which I think was overdue, and it does charge via Type-C. I think it's a great pen for a free included, not really free, you are paying for it, but included with the package, and it is using N-Trig drivers, so you are getting the Surface Pro experience without the Surface Pro price. And I do prefer this pen, again, over the previous generation that I got with my 13T. So Intel's 11th gen 1165 G7 i7 processor is powering this whole experience, 16 gigs of RAM and a ½ terabyte NVMe. I'll include a link in the description if you're interested in purchasing this. This specific build is currently out of stock, but you can still, of course, find other very similar builds. 4¼ pounds, pretty solid speaker quality, Windows Hello via its IR webcam, top center, 720p capability, which is good. I do wish the webcam was a little bit better, but hopefully that's something we'll see from manufacturers as time goes on. So far, I'm yet to test any laptop that has a fantastic webcam, so I can't really give it to HP on this because this is an industry-wide issue. It isn't specific to any manufacturer in particular. Keyboard is fantastic. In fact, HP, one of my favorites, they're right there with Lenovo. I like the key travel. I like all of the different keys they give you. I love the numerical keypad. I'll tell you right now, though, if you're planning on doing heavy 4K video editing, or even, I mean, you can edit 4K video on this, as well as, of course, jump into Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop. So for images, not a problem either. But if you're going to really be putting this specific model through heavier tasks, I would look at the one that comes with the NVIDIA dedicated GPU that I covered back in 2020. It's still the current model. It hasn't been replaced yet. I do expect a refresh will happen soon, but you're going to want the dedicated GPU. For those of you that aren't looking to do more than really what an Ultrabook does, but in a larger form factor, it doesn't get as hot, it gets solid battery life. Again, a very nice display. Even if you don't go OLED, you're going to get exactly what you want. I think this is great for college students. I think it's great for just about everyone. This is a real wide appeal machine, in my opinion, and that's because it's large with its 15.6-inch panel. Touchscreen, of course, the two-in-one is what you're after, right? And this does all of that. You're not going to have any problems with that at all. Tent mode, tablet mode. This is a little bit heavy at 4¼ to do tablet mode, but it really is a very well-rounded machine. Build quality is excellent. I think the style and design language that they present is also really good. You have a fingerprint scanner right there. Again, tough to beat this keyboard. The speakers are not out of this world, but when it comes to two-in-ones, the only one you'll find with better audio is from Lenovo, and that's the Yoga series. That soundbar beats everybody, but this has advantages, of course, as well. So first thing I want to do is just point out what you have on the machine itself. 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. This is also a way, if you choose to charge it, but it does come with a 135-watt power brick with a pin connector that will charge this up in a little less than 2 hours. We have a Type A USB port right there, and then we have a micro SD card slot. A lot of people say for storage expansion, but realistically, this is to read SD cards, not expand your storage, in my opinion. As a photographer, that's what I look for in laptops like this. HDMI on the other side, and right above it is the proprietary power port, as I was mentioning earlier. And then we have our headphone and microphone combo jack, and that's pretty much it. So this is, again, if you don't need dedicated graphics, if you're not looking for that experience, then you'll be perfectly satisfied with what this machine has to offer. In terms of pricing, you'll also be saving money because, of course, the dedicated GPU will set you back extra cash. But I do recommend, as I stated, the OLED. The advantage to this IPS panel, again, is battery life and pricing and not having to worry about burn-in. But I don't really generally worry about burn-in these days. I feel like, at least my experience, outside of OLED televisions, is that they do hold up fairly well, despite all of the static images that are there that could potentially burn in. The pen input I mentioned is good. Is this ideal for digital artists? Well, I feel like that's a bit of a loaded question. You know, it sketches well. My fiance, my other half, is the artist in the family, and her experience with these machines is good. You know, it's not too different, a little bit better than the 15T, again, with the dedicated GPU, and that's because we did get a new pen, and that makes a difference. Updated drivers. If you go ahead and take a look at her sketch sample, which I think is about 7 months old now, because that was, again, a different machine than this, the experience is fairly similar, just a little bit better here, but ever so marginally better. And what that means is that if you're an artist, you'll have no problem sketching here, being creative, taking notes, but this isn't going to replace an artist-specific machine, like something from Wacom, whatever you want to call it, Wacom, or any other dedicated device that's really aiming specifically at that niche. But it is a 2-in-1, which means it is trying to give you the best of both worlds. The RAM is soldered, so keep that in mind. You do not want to underbuy on that because you're not going to be able to upgrade it. You can upgrade the NVMe, that is the SSD, the hard drive that comes here, but if you've selected the capacity you need, you likely won't need to do that. I feel like this is the type of machine you buy, you know, what you're looking for, make the right decision the first time, and you don't worry about upgrading it or trying to do anything beyond what you're getting out of the box. The trackpad is completely competent, but is fairly small. And I think if I was going to give one major critique to HP on the 15T line, it's they could make the trackpad larger. Now, personally, I think it's fine, but I know a lot of you out there are accustomed to trackpads that are bigger, both in terms of, well, basically the whole span, width and height. So if you're looking for something with a larger trackpad, this is not the machine for you, but I will tell you right now, completely competent, it is glass, precision drivers, and it works exactly as it should. Again, much like the keyboard, I feel the trackpad, they're both very good. The keyboard, though, I think takes the cake. I love the LED indicator for the mute switch for both speakers and for microphone. You don't have to go and look to see whether or not things are muted. You know just by glancing at the keyboard. HP is one of the few companies that does this. Other manufacturers are jumping on board, especially in the pandemic realm that we're all residing in, because it's a no-brainer. So many things are being done through Zoom, Skype. You need to have a little bit of visual control when it comes to your video conferencing. So definitely something I think is a necessity. And the numpad, you know, if you need it, you need it. If you don't, you know, you might want to consider a different machine, quite frankly. I know some of you will be irked by the fact that, you know, things are offset like the trackpad and the keyboard because of the numpad. I'd rather have a numerical pad personally, so I don't take any issue with it. Now, and when it comes to the internals, you have to remember, this is essentially the 13T stuffed into a larger chassis. Here's the 13T, again, with all of the same internals, pretty much, at least when it comes to processor, when it comes to RAM, not NVMe. This has a 1 terabyte NVMe, and this does have the OLED display. So what is the difference? Well, because this is a larger body, because it has more space, more surface area, it stays cooler, and that may matter to you. You know, when you have something as dense and compact as the 13T, which has rolled up the internals of this machine into a much smaller body and is more than a pound less in overall weight, because this is 4.25 and the 13T is a little under 3, and that's without the power brick. You know, there are trade-offs. So here, this machine will stay cooler on your lap than the 13T, or the 14T for that matter. The 14T being the 3:2 aspect ratio option, completely different than this or the 13T, because these, the 13T and 15T, both have 16:9 aspect ratios. Also, beyond it being cooler, the fans don't get particularly loud on this, so if that's another thing you're worried about, that has been answered right now. When it comes to battery life, it's another thing that is fairly good, and I think that's part of the beauty of this machine. You're looking at 8 to 10 hours, at the very least 8, and you know, if you really try to squeeze things, you could get to 10. Now, if you go with the OLED version of this, you're going to be a lot closer to that 8, maybe even 7, and then you're flirting with the same battery life as going with the model I mentioned that has the dedicated GPU. So that's all the more argument if you're willing to get the OLED display here. Again, I'm going to come back and tell you, you probably should be getting the one with the dedicated GPU, because battery life is almost the same, but inherently having that dedicated GPU gives you a lot more power when it comes to video editing and photo editing. Does it make a world of difference? No, but it is good to have if you plan on doing those sorts of things. Now, if productivity, entertainment, light gaming, again, very light gaming, because all we have is Iris Xe, so those are older titles like the ones I have already installed here and that I've played, you know, not brand new AAA titles. You're not going to run Cyberpunk on this, but if you want to play Counter-Strike, if you want to play something like Rust, Call of Duty World War II, not so great, because that is more of a modern title than the two I just mentioned, you won't have any problems at 1080p with low settings, which is really nice, again, on a machine that is fairly large, is a 2-in-1, and gets solid battery life. So, with no dedicated GPU, most importantly. And then the other advantage is pricing. This is an incredibly affordable machine when you think of its premium build and that it's a 2-in-1. Really tough to beat. I mean, I think this retails now, it was originally about a $1,500 machine. I think now you could probably find it for around $1,300. Again, check the link that I will include in the description. But it's very hard to beat that. And then one of the things I happen to like about HP a lot that I guess a lot of people don't know, and I don't mention this in all of my videos, but I'm mentioning it here, is that if you choose to get the extended warranty through them, they refund the money, unless their policy has changed, if you don't exercise the warranty. So if you go ahead and get the 3-year extended, you know, with accidental coverage, if you never end up making a claim, if the machine never goes back to them, they give you the money back. Now, that policy may have changed. That's last I checked, which was a few years ago. I think it still is the policy, and I think it's a brilliant one. If it's not the policy, go ahead and let me know, and I stand corrected, of course. You know, this is a machine that I am reviewing, and that obviously is a review unit that's going back, but as usual, not paid to do this review. The only incentive for me is I get to, of course, play with new tech, share it with all of you, and in the event you end up using an affiliate link, then I see something out of this, but that's about it. So really, this is all about, you know, the love of the game, if you will, and this is one of my favorite 2-in-1s. You know, when it comes to 2-in-1s, I feel like HP and Lenovo are the best options on the market, and which one you're going to pick is really ultimately going to be decided by how they look and what specifically you're trying to do with the machine in question. So again, to reiterate, this specific 15T is really just an oversized 13T, but for many of you, the 13T is too small. I know many people that will not buy laptops unless they have at least a 15.5-inch display. So this does that, accomplishes that goal perfectly. The fact that you've got Thunderbolt 4, I think, is great. That's something that I gave it up with my Asus G15, but I generally speaking wouldn't do that. Touchscreen, as I mentioned, is great. Doesn't get too hot. I mean, it can get hot, but you're not going to burn your lap. Fans are not overly loud. Audio quality on here is pretty much the same as the previous generation, which is a good thing. Not amazing speakers. Again, not in the yoga realm, but good. Definitely better than the 13T. And they should be. It's a much bigger piece of hardware. Again, 1.25 pounds more in weight. So Some of you ask about the hinges and whether or not they hold up. I've had no issues. You can see no jiggling around, but this is really what the Spectre lineup is all about. You can open this with a single hand, but once you get to about midway, it will lift the bottom, and that's just a matter of balance. I love that we've got Windows Hello. HP really made their mark when they introduced the new screen-to-body ratio at the end of 2019 and incorporated Windows Hello. So even if the webcam isn't phenomenal, the fact that we've got one that is IR capable and the bezel is nearly nil is still great. This is a modern looking machine. Again, build quality is good. Even though I went through some build quality issues with the 13T back in 2019, they ended up getting resolved. HP was good about it, and I was able to straighten things out. And with these review units, I haven't had any issues. No squeaking, no creaking, no keys having issues, no clicking in the trackpad, touchpad that shouldn't be happening. Also, of course, for the webcam, there is a privacy switch on the right side of the machine for those of you that are wondering. Now, I mentioned that just in case. But again, tough not to like this. If you know you need more horsepower, you already know where to look, because if you like this machine, it also comes in Poseidon Blue besides the Nightfall Black that you're looking at here, then you already know you can go to the one with the dedicated GPU and the Intel H series processor. Now, if you know you want the more powerful machine, not this one, but the one with the H series CPU as well as dedicated NVIDIA GPU, wait a little bit, because if you can, that is, because the machine I reviewed back in 2020, of course, is getting somewhat old. A refresh should be coming soon, and while it won't destroy the previous gen that I reviewed, why not have the latest and greatest? Now, if you can get an amazing deal on the 10th gen Intel H series machine that I'm mentioning, this but with the H series CPU, then why not? I mean, again, it's not going to be night and day. It's not like the battery life is going to double, and you know, the GPU capability is going to double either. Although I have a feeling we're going to see a good amount of performance when we get an 11th gen CPU and 30 series-esque GPU in one of these. I mean, it's getting to dream machine status, but overall, really like this, and I think anyone who follows my channel knew that would be the case, because they already know that I love the 13T. The 15T is just a larger version, and if that's what you need, it's hard to really go wrong with this machine. Again, I personally am more of a fan of the Poseidon Blue than the Nightfall Black, but that's completely personal. Some of you probably love the copper accents here, which are a little bit more rose gold to me than copper. And as I've stated, you know, you're not going to want to take this apart. It's not practical on any Ultrabooks, in my opinion, are not really practical. I mean, Lenovo with theirs maybe a little bit more, but if you wanted to upgrade the NVMe, you're going to have to pull off these rubber strips, and then they're not going to adhere again properly, so you'll end up having to buy a part. So get what you need. I mean, that's the lesson to be learned here. Don't try to cut corners. If you know you need a 1 terabyte NVMe, get the 1 terabyte. I think HP still caps out at 2 terabytes on all of these. I'm sure at some point that's going to change. But again, this runs relatively cool, relatively quiet, 4¼ pounds, a great display, even if you don't go OLED, 8 to 10 hours of battery life, pen input, and what's not to like? And of course, again, you can charge via Type-C as well. So if you're traveling and you don't take that 135 watt quick charge brick, you can still use a Type-C 65 watt. One more thing you should know is that with the Spectre series, it's kind of been hit or miss about where the pen could be stored. You know, it does come with a sleeve, and you can generate most of them, and you can generally put it in a loop there. They give you a spot, but a lot of people want something incorporated into the machine. With the 14T, the pen locks on really tightly on the left side of the machine. Here, it's nowhere near as tight. You know, it's as I can knock it right off. So if there's another thing that HP should improve, it's going to be the magnetic connection between their new pen and the actual Spectre itself. So hopefully that's something they address. You know, the back on the 13T is a good spot, but of course, if you forget it's there and you open it up, the pen's going to pop off, so that's not really brilliant. But overall, I just think that this is one of the best options on the market, still here in the middle of 2021. And from a pricing standpoint, It's just, I think it's a value, which traditionally the Spectre lineup is not about value. It's about being HP's top of the line consumer product 2-in-1. So the fact that it's now a value, I think, makes it all the more compelling. So I'm a big fan of the 15T, kind of like the 13T. So if you need a desktop replacement, this, probably isn't the powerhouse that you should be getting. But if you know that you're not going to do anything crazy and you love having 2-in-1, pen input, this is pretty much the machine to beat outside of Yoga's offering. The Lenovo is a little bit heavier. So really, I would say this competes more directly with the 9i, which has a 14-inch display. And that machine is completely different in terms of design cues, but not that different in terms of hardware. A little bit different, but they perform incredibly similarly. So it's really, in my opinion, a matter of pricing and a matter of personal preference with the actual design. Just know, if you really must have best-in-class audio, then you're going to have to go Yoga. If the sound quality is not that important, then the Spectre is a really solid option. So, I mean, even the included NVMe benchmarks well, so, which is not something you necessarily expect in this type of machine. So, great build quality, very aggressive pricing, and I don't think you could have too many complaints. Again, this is a wide net machine. This is something that grandparents, parents, kids, everyone can enjoy using. It's a multimedia experience, and again, I'm shocked that it's something where I'm willing to forego the OLED, but that's going to ultimately also come down to, as I've stated, pricing and whether or not you're really concerned about burn-in. A little more battery life, though, which I don't think is a bad thing, but the battery life may be negligible at the end of the day. Since I don't have the OLED version, I can't give you exact numbers, but I'm guesstimating based on my experience with the OLED version of the 15T that has the NVIDIA GPU, which of course sips more power than this because its processor and dedicated GPU sip more power. But hopefully this answers your questions whether or not you want to get on board with the 15T in 2021. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.